This just in, the 12 jurors in Trump's hush money trial have begun their deliberations after hearing 6 weeks of testimony. Many conservatives online are very concerned about Judge Merchan's instructions for the jurors. Legal analyst Jonathan Turley wrote on X, quote, Merchan just delivered the coup de grace instruction. He said there's no need to agree on what occurred. They can disagree on what the crime was among the three choices. Thus, this means they could split 4-4-4, and he will still treat them as unanimous. Now, journalist Emily Zanotti attempted to provide some further clarification, tweeting, quote, notably, they do have to be unanimous on the crime of falsifying the documents. What they don't have to be unanimous on is what crime they think Trump falsified the documents to cover up. They just need to agree a crime was committed. This is how Trump reacted to that news.
Mother Teresa could not beat these charges. These charges are rigged. The whole thing is rigged. The whole country's a mess between the borders and fake elections, and you have a trial like this where the judge is so conflicted he can't breathe.
Meanwhile, the Biden-Harris campaign is doing damage control on Robert De Niro's appearance outside the courthouse yesterday, which did not go over well. Even MSNBC's Morning Joe questioned whether they politicized the trial. Let's watch.
Last week, when the members of Congress showed up to support Donald Trump, I called it unbecoming of the office. They're serving the people of their district, American citizens. They're not supposed to politicize a court proceeding. And I feel the same way about the campaign. Is there any concern about the campaign getting a little bit too close to these court proceedings, and could that backfire? Any concerns? Looking back, was it a good decision?
No, there's no concern. This campaign is not speaking about the substance of the trial in any way, shape, or form. What we are talking about, what we talked about yesterday, and what we'll continue to talk about, is the unique threat that Donald Trump poses to our democracy.
Oof. Okay. Sorry, it's hard not to want to engage in that directly. Look.
Go ahead, engage in that directly.
I agree that there's a parallel between, and a kind of consistency between saying you think it is inappropriate for Republican Congress members to show up to the trial and politicize it, and also to have Robert De Niro here. I have a couple of questions. I do think that, one, Robert De Niro is not a sitting Congress member, so to the extent that maybe Democrats did have a little bit of self-awareness and tried to put a little distance between this, it wasn't like AOC and Jamal Bowman and a bunch of New York representatives showing up at the trial. It was this person
man.
who
He can do whatever he wants.
Right. So I do think that makes it better for what it's worth. But the reason the event was bad was because it didn't work. It's because De Niro doesn't have the cool factor, the gravitas, or the social cachet for it to do what I guess Democrats wanted to do, which is to reclaim the mantle of being a real New York guy. Like, I don't even know what that is. And so then, you do open yourself up to also these claims of hypocrisy, that you basically sicked your surrogate on the Trump trial while trying to claim that you have the higher ground of not trying to politicize something like that.
Right, and you waded into the spectacle, the entertainment waters.
Right.
He's just an entertainer. He's a
right.
movie star. He's really good in movies. Does he know anything about politics? No.
Yeah.
Why do we turn to people who are? I always appreciate Anthony Hopkins, one of the greatest actors of our generation. Once said in an interview, he never says anything about politics. He says, because I don't know anything. And
I will say that's
I love that.
Little bit
That's
rich.
My favorite attitude.
It's a little bit of a rich attitude when the person on trial is a former entertainer who has become the leader of the Republican Party. But I take your point.
So I saw a lot of very upset conservatives about how the judge framed the decision the jury needs to make. So this is in accordance with New York law. But because remember, the covering up, it has to be in the way the prosecution has structured this argument is somewhat complicated, that it's not just enough to have had this financial disclosure having been wrong. It has to be in furtherance of an additional crime. And I was reading this really comprehensive write-up from my colleague at Reason Magazine, Jacob Sullum, who is a brilliant legal thinker and is not at all soft on the issue of whether Donald Trump has committed crimes, has written very, in any way not sympathetic or friendly to Trump at all on various legal matters, is not, his article is very comprehensive, and maybe we can actually get him on the show to explain it, because it's a complicated issue, but he is not overly impressed with the prosecution's case. What he's saying is he feels like they're saying on some level that even with the underlying crime being, trying to hoodwink the American people or hide from the American people the reality of this affair with Stormy Daniels. And he's saying, well, that might be bad, but is that really a crime? Is the prosecution saying that if Donald Trump merely tried to, what if he just spoke to Stormy Daniels and say, hey, I really would like you to not say anything about it? There's no financial aspect to it. Would that still be hiding the information from the American people? We would obviously recognize that wouldn't be a crime. So they've used these interacting statutes of potential financial impropriety to dress up that aspect of it not being a crime in the first place and make it look criminal in nature.
Well, my understanding is that there's no dispute that the falsification of the business records is a crime. The question whether or not
right,
is whether or not it gets bumped up
right.
to a felony.
Because it's in furtherance of an additional crime.
Right.
That's where he.
But I just want to be really clear. It's not, the issue isn't, well, if he said it to her instead of writing it down. I mean, the crime is the falsification of business record. It is the writing it down, and that's important, right? That is the evidence of the actual fraud. That he did not disclose that this payment was being made for what the payment was being used for, and in fact wrote it off as a legal expense.
Right.
Okay. The second part, as my understanding, I think that's right, that the most difficult aspect of this was not proving the violation of the falsification of the business record crime, but this kind of novel legal theory that bumps up the consequences to felony consequences
right.
that could potentially, it's unlikely, but potentially include jail time by tying it to this fraud against the American people, if you will. And I do wonder if that is going to be an issue. Now, that is also the focus of this viral Twitter movement that's going on right now about the jury instructions, where there's been this claim that it isn't necessary to have a unanimous verdict here. That's not quite true. The question is whether or not you can think that the verdict is guilty, but base the underlying crime, like what you think that underlying crime is, on different kinds of crimes, have different theories of the case, but still come to the conclusion that the business records were falsified. That's what there doesn't have to be unanimity on.
Right. And my colleague Jacob Selm does think the jury may very well buy it. This is not to say that Trump's going to get off. I think we're, waiting very eagerly to find out. Yeah. But it's certainly been interesting. This whole trial has ended up being a kind of vice presidential tryout session on the Republican side. I saw J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, who have both been names mentioned in contention here, both weighing in on the latest instructions from the judge, thunderously upset about it. I was actually on Fox News over the weekend, and there was an interview with Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, at the right in the midst of the interview I did, and he said similar things. So I think Trump is perhaps making his decision based on the amount of loyalty or the effectiveness of his surrogates in
that's
the
interesting.
charges against him.
This trial might have more effect on who ends up being Trump's VP than it does on the American public's perception.
Certainly. I think there's
Donald
no
Trump
question that's going to happen.
To be in public office. The polls are still holding, showing that Trump still has a small lead over Biden, and that the public just doesn't think that this case is especially influential to their decision as to whether or not he would be a better or worse president than Joe Biden. And one does have to ask the question also, is the focus on this trial and the timing of these trials, which is not entirely up to, obviously, the Democratic Party, but does the timing of these trials and the fact that this one is coming first kind of undermine how much focus, attention, and seriousness the other more substantive cases are going to get, to the extent that we even get them started in time for them to have an effect on the election?
I would say it's obviously not coordinated at the national level by the Biden campaign. It does involve Democratic prosecutors who ran on platforms of prosecuting Donald Trump.
Well, it also
and
it also
cases.
involves
It was part
Trump.
of the Democratic election effort at the level.
And it also involves judges that were appointed by Trump. A lot of the pushback against Eileen Cannon's choice not to issue a gag order for Trump's latest "the FBI is trying to kill me" claim is that she was a Trump appointee. And so these claims are flying back and forth all over the place. I'm not here to validate some and dismiss others. But we do live in a political world and political system. It's why there's so much consternation over Alito's flags and the like. I think at the bare minimum, people's expectation is to try to be subtle about it. Not that people aren't going to have ideological and political priors, but subtlety itself has gone right out the window, whether it's Alito's flags, whether it's the VP stakes that are happening at the courthouse, whether it's Robert De Niro. The whole thing is just up in the air. And I think when you're looking at how the public is reacting to it, the response seems to be to just check out of it all.
Yeah, so the Trump trial coming to an end. Another trial, the Hunter Biden trial, obviously going to get underway with various exes of him testifying. I'm sure you saw the headline of Joe Biden paying a rare visit to, who was it to Haley Biden, or it was to one of the, you didn't see that headline?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it was people are making a lot of, it's like when the mob boss visits the person about to give testimony.
Or a daughter-in-law. Was it the Beau's former wife?
Makes surprise nighttime visit to Haley Biden. Yes, just days before the trial. I wonder what they talked about there.
All right, well, we will continue to follow that story and bring you all the news that's fit to chat about. Stick around, more Rising coming up next.